T-minus 10, 9, 8, 7, 6, 5. All three engines up and burning. 2, 1, 0, and liftoff.
Coach on Fire Radio.
I've been taken for your doctor. Moon, moon on the water, lay me down upon your altar.
Great music by Rachel Hamer. You can find her music at rachelhamer.com/music. Thank you for tuning in today to Sacred Erotic with Gila Nehemiah. This show is about remembrance. I'm going to start off with a quote by Osho. If you don't know who he is, I'd recommend that you look him up. He was a teacher from India, and he had a commune in Pune that still exists, and a commune in the United States, and possibly in other countries. He had a lot of amazing lectures and amazing words to impart, and this particular quote is poignant for today. He says, "Truth is not to be found outside. No teacher, no scripture can give it to you. It is inside you, and if you wish to attain it, seek your own company. Be with yourself." The reason why I think this is so important is because one of the tenets of what I teach, of what I coach, is that all wisdom is within us. Everything that we need is within. And the reason I think this is so important is because most of my life I was searching for answers. I was looking to psychics. I went to astrologers. I went to all sorts of people to give me answers, to tell me what I needed to do, to show me the way of my true longings, of fulfilling my destiny of my life. Little did I realize that I have all the tools within me. I have the tools within my womb space. I have the tools within my heart space. I have the tools in my entire body. When someone told me that a little bit over a year ago, I couldn't even believe it. I had a coach whom I started with, and I used to always second guess myself, and I had to ask her, should I do this? Should I take this route? And she said, well, what does your heart tell you? And I almost asked her in disbelief, you think that my heart is going to tell me the answer? And she said, yes, ask your heart. Listen to your heart and hear the message it tells you. And I was just dumbfounded. I was like, wow, okay. And I started to do it, and magical things started happening to me. And then I had, more mentors after her. And then they told me to listen to my body and to listen to divine messages when I meditate. And I was like, wow, where am I? I'm not used to this. As I told you in my earlier podcast, I came from a real logical background. My parents always told me that I had to listen to my teachers. I had to read books. I had to think with my logical mind. I had to have a really good education and get a good job. And though I believe that, and I live by that, I also grew up around a lot of art, a lot of music, a lot of dance, a lot of spirituality and devotion. My father had this booming voice, and he was very magnetic, and he could light up a room with his songs. And so I had this dichotomy as a child growing up, knowing that logic and education and science and writing even is helps me to grow, helps me to mentally engage. Yet there was always this part of me that longed for something else, something intangible, something I couldn't explain. Yet I could feel it in my father's voice. I can feel it in the music. I could feel it when I used to dance. And I didn't know how to go after it. And so I would always kind of put it aside. And what I'm asking you today is about remembering those intangible feelings you may have felt as a child. I believe our soul reminds us of who we are. You know, as I said, wisdom is within. All our knowledge is in our body, our hearts. You know, now my tagline is that you follow your heart, your womb space, because that is the truth. And also, when I was growing up, my mother used to tell me a lot of stories when I was young. She was South Asian, and some of the women who my mother grew up with didn't attend higher education, and so and they're very used to telling stories. There's an oral tradition in India and probably in a lot of other countries where women learn, teach their daughters through stories of how to live, how to, what happened before, the experiences they had, what they learned. And my mother grew up in a small village in India where there were rice paddies and, rice grew from the ground. And I went there, I saw it, and she'd tell me about her quiet time, how she liked to read, about her family. And, and through the words, I heard some sadness. She told me how she wanted to go to college and she wasn't able to because, her family required that she get married when she was young. And, I realized that she couldn't go after her desires. She didn't feel like she had the opportunity to say no. And that struck me. It struck me as a child when she told me. I was quite young, maybe 4 or 5, possibly 6. I was young. And I knew what she was telling me, or what I heard through the words was, I heard her sadness, but I also heard, at least how I interpreted it was, I'm not going to live a life like that. I'm going to do whatever my heart desires. And I say that because many times when we're told things, or we're, our stories are explained to us, we can read beyond that. There's an emotion that's conveyed, that goes through the words, that are in between the letters. Especially when somebody tells you a story, you get to see their face, and you get to hear and see and feel so much more than words on a page. And I think what I do value in my childhood was those moments when either my mother or my aunt, many of the women in my life would tell me stories, and I would love to hear them. I also loved reading stories, but hearing them tell stories of a time that wasn't like the time I was growing up in a foreign land was always fascinating. It took me to a different place. And now, as I'm talking to you about remembrance, I feel like I am going back there. I'm remembering the little child that I was at that time. Very impressionable and very enamored by the exotic, different way of living, without all of the amenities that we have. And when I would go back and visit with my parents when I was young, it was a completely different life. It was it wasn't normal to have a fridge in the house. Everyone didn't have a car. It's just now the things that we take for granted. I'm not quite sure how it is there. I hope to find out soon. But I think now they live more of a middle class life, so things may not be as different. But at that time, it was like going back in time, so I felt like I was in a time machine almost, which is kind of a cool idea. But I invite you to think about times when you were with your parents or with loved ones, and the stories that they used to tell you, and where does it take you? Where were you going? What did you imagine? and if you actually saw those places, how did it influence you? Part of what I want to talk about today is how our feelings and our soul, our desires, are actually telling us something about what our soul wants to do with our life, what we want to do with our life. I, as a child, was exposed to all this, and my parents had the ability to help me to travel and, to take me to their place of origin, which was amazing. And then I desired to travel. I desired to see lots of places on my own when I was in college, and it was amazing. It was great, and I felt like I was always searching. I was always looking for something. I was always desiring something else. And as I got to each of those desires, I always felt a little bit empty. And I feel like I felt empty because there was something that I was looking for, but I didn't know what it was. I wasn't able to remember. And, when I say that, I think you understand. It's like this, it's this yearning, it's this, this fantasy you have in your head of something that once you see it, it's totally right. Like there's a, like when something just feels so, like it just clicks, and you're like, yes, that's what it is. But I didn't know what, but personally, I didn't really know what it was until I found it. But once I found it, I was like, yeah, that's exactly what I've been looking for. So I invite you to be in that kind of space, that I know, or I'm hoping that some of you may have had that experience. Maybe you found these are amazing shoes, or something that just really, like, you were like, yeah, that was what I was looking for. When I say this, I talk about your soul. I talk about like meeting a person who you just really gel with, and you're just like, oh my goodness, like I've known you before, or a good friend who you just met, and you just have such an amazing conversation with them, and you're like, wow, that was so cool. Like, you're just taken away by the whole experience because you're so in the now. You're so in it, it's so like all these synchronicities that are occurring. You're just like, whoa, this is just like super amazing, super cool that this is even occurring. I feel like we're in this time period of that is more of a norm than an unusual occurrence. I know, when I was traveling, when I was young, when I was meeting lots of new people, and I wasn't married yet, and, I was looking for that, but I never found it. And I always wondered, like, when was that happening? Or if it ever was. I used to think it was just a fantasy. I got married, I had the kids, and I still felt like, and then I got widowed, and I was just like, all right, well, this is my time to look again, but what I'm inviting you to do is actually like to kind of look at that. When I talk about remembrance, I talk about, my mother telling me stories as a child. I want you to look at it from a child's point of view. I think that once we look at life as an adventure, then it becomes much more palatable. We're not looking at our experiences and feeling stuck in them, but we're looking at things, with a curiosity. I have 3 kids, and my youngest is 9. And, and sometimes she just looks at me with this wonder in her eyes. She hasn't yet been jaded, even though she's had so many experiences already as a 9-year-old. She still has this wonder, and there's a beauty in that. There's there's just this, that childlike, it brings out the childness in me. We just recently went to the beach, and I didn't want to go. And she said, yeah, come on, let's go, and the water was cold. And I was like, oh, I don't want to go in. She's like, oh, come on, let's get in the water. Let's jump the waves. And I was so glad she pulled me in there with her, because then I enjoyed the waves almost more than she did, just because that inner child in me started to come out. So I'm inviting